Now, the former public protector has added a strong voice to the growing number of people who are questioning the constitutionality of the government's COVID-19 lockdown regulations. In an open letter to the president, she insists that all policies, including lockdown regulations, must comply with the constitution. She joins us now live on the line. A very good morning, Advocate Thuli Madonsela. Thank you again for joining us on Weekend Dawn. It's always a pleasure chatting to you. My first question obviously refers to your article when you say that those who are bearing the brunt of the draconian regulations do not have the means to engage with public policymakers. Can you explain to us what you mean by this?
Thank you, Jacob. Good morning to the listeners. Those who are bearing the brunt of the regulations are the majority of people, the young people who were self-employed before these policies. The Gogotlaminis who were selling amangunya and woodcraft, etc., before the magunya, the domestic workers, etc., before the regulations. I must say two things, though. The letter was written just before we went to phase 3, to level 3. The letter was written just before we went to level 3. Hence, some of the concerns have been addressed. And secondly, the letter does not challenge all the regulations. It is concerned about equality, about poverty, and accordingly about social justice. That although we are all treated the same, the impact on others is devastating. It follows on a previous article that I wrote about the fact that we all being asked to sacrifice to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But in the end, others will not just sacrifice, they will be the sacrifice.
So this goes then into my next question about the reasonableness of the regulations and how they were actually adopted. It seems as though policymakers didn't actually consider all the issues surrounding the regulations.
Well, they didn't, and I think the president has admitted, because at the beginning they had to act fast. If they hadn't, there would have been a carnage. We would not be talking about whether the regulations are reasonable or not. We would be calling the government the butcher. And therefore it was just and equitable that government should act fast. But after the first 21 days or during the first 21 days, there should have been a social justice lens and a reasonability lens put on those regulations parallel to them being implemented. And the first extension should have included a better social justice lens, which in some way it did. For example, you'll recall that spaza shops were initially closed, taxi industry was closed except for essential services, whilst people were told you can go shopping, but there was no transport. So there has been liberalization. What my letter is saying is that the liberalization is not enough for people who are in the gig industry. And secondly, it's not enough for social life. For example, people being able to leave their own children with their own mothers who don't live with them in the same house, and people being able to attend funerals of close relatives, because the regulations have suddenly reduced us to a nuclear family, and no African family is a nuclear family.
Well said. Now, let's talk a little about the limitations of the rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights when it comes to these regulations.
Yes. If we're specific about the rights that the regulations impact on, I would say key among those rights is Section 28 dealing with the rights of children, Section 22 that deals with the right to trade. And when you read Section 22 of the Constitution, you must take it together with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 23, which gives everyone the right to work. And then you have movement in Section 21. You have the right to equality in Section 9 and the right to human dignity in 10. Some of these rights are derogable. In other words, government has a right to limit those rights with a law of general application. And to some extent, you could say regulations are a law of general application, but to the extent that these regulations have never been tested in Parliament, I'm afraid when the Constitutional Court finally reviews them, it is going to give government a tongue lashing for being a runaway jury. If we had declared a state of emergency, that would have been done under parliamentary supervision, and it would have declared it for 21 days. After 21 days, Parliament would have been the one to decide whether or not to extend the state of emergency, etc. Now we have the executive doing all of these things by itself. And
right.
instead of having deviated from the Disaster Management Act, which allows the decision-making to involve all three levels of government, which is national, provincial, and local.
Advocate, I'd like to talk about the churches. What is your position on the opening of churches? We assume that there will be some South Africans who will obviously head back to church and take this opportunity. In your view, was this a reasonable recognition of Section 15 of the Constitution, the right to freedom?
Yes, certainly. I do say in my article that Section 15 prevailed, but that having been said, our request as the Social Justice Forum, or SCOPRA, was that people be given the right to consult with the church, to visit in smaller groups, because most people, when they're undergoing distress, they need to pray with someone, and therefore you would need a small prayer group or your pastor. But going to church per se is a bit risky. Again, I'm not saying government is unreasonable. I'm saying government has put the ball in our court. But government does not always have to stop us from doing things. In terms of how COVID-19 has been responded to globally, there is control and there's persuasion. So when it comes to the churches, government has put the ball back in our court, and I think no church should open for a general service. But there should be an opportunity for a pastor to visit a family, or for a family to go and pray in church, but each church should make arrangements so that there should be no more than one family in church praying, should there be a need to pray.
Now, what about the COVID-19 law and related public consultation process? Do you think that would have been something that worked a lot better when the regulations were being put in place?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jacob. When the president announced the first lockdown, there had been extensive public consultations. And when he announced now the move to level 3, there had been some consultations, but the law requires more than that. I still do not understand why government is not operating according to the Disaster Management Act, where there's a permanent structure that brings these role players under one wing. In that way, government gets the wisdom of these structures, but secondly, people don't then become people outside the arena, because the truth is, Jacob, we criticize government because it's easier to criticize than to do. The man in the arena, the woman in the arena faces far more difficulties than the spectator. And the best games I've played, personally, the best chess games I've played are those when I was a spectator. So government should stop making the nation a nation of spectators. Occasionally consulted.
In closing, Advocate, I just want to find out, in your opinion, what will be the next step, considering that the Cabinet will be taking this matter now on appeal? What are the prospects of success?
Two things, sir. One is, do take the judge's wisdom seriously, although government is definitely going to win this case in court. I would be shocked if it doesn't, because the judge should not have impaired all of the regulations and also declared some irrational when they're not irrational. But government should look at this judgment because it has lots of kernels of wisdom and implement some of the wisdom. Secondly, government should now let Parliament discuss this matter so that we move forward as a nation. It's too divisive to have government deal with this matter alone in a little corner.
All right. Advocate Thuli Madonsela, thank you for your time. That was former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela speaking to us about her open letter to the President with regards to the constitutionality of lockdown regulations at level 3 and 4. A big thank you to her for her time.